Well, all right. What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to Generation, Bridging the Gap with the Rex.
And Eva.
And we got another special guest in the house, Mom.
Yes.
We're on a roll.
We are on a roll.
We kind of like having moms.
We do.
Are we going to have to adjust the name of this podcast?
I don't know. It's hard to already work around two schedules. But, hi Dakota. She's also down here. It's our entire family tonight. But, a little background. We are all recording these on the same day. So we were like, why not join us? And so she did. But we did table topics last week. And one of the questions we didn't get to was who has inspired you as a mentor and why? And honestly, it's a great topic. We could talk a whole episode about it. So that's what we're going to do. So you want to start with a little background or whatever?
Yeah. And actually, we can talk about mentors. We can talk about teachers. We were specifically talking about teachers this afternoon because one of the books that I'm just finishing up is talking about what impacts college students the most. And it's not necessarily the university they attend, it's the experiences they had at that university. And I started telling you, hey, that applies to your junior high experience, your high school experience, your life experience. It's the people in those experiences that tend to make the most difference in our lives. And so I just started thinking back about not only mentors, but teachers. And the first teacher that really had a major impact in my life was Miss Bassham. She was my 6th grade English teacher. And I'm not saying that teachers in the 1st through 5th grade did not believe in me. That's not what I'm saying at all. But Miss Bassham was the first one that I explicitly knew that she believed in me. And my story, I even forgot about this part until it's just now coming back to my memory as I'm talking. I was scared to death to give speeches. And the 6th grade was the first. I was good at writing. I was extremely good at writing papers, and my English was good. I just had a grasp on grammar, punctuation, spelling, the whole nine. And I was selected as the most outstanding male student in 6th grade English that year. And then
impressive.
I did it. Then I did it again in my 7th grade year. And then I thought I was automatically going to get it in the 8th grade. And that teacher got mad at me because I never brought a pen and pencil and paper to class. And she said, you are not the most outstanding student. You may can write. You may have won the award these last 2 years, but just simply due to the fact, because I asked her, how do I know this? Because I asked her after it was over. I said, whoa. I'm like, hey, we just had the end of year of school convocation. I am the man in English, and I am 2 years running, and you just messed the Triple Crown up. I'm like, what is wrong with you? And I'll never forget, this teacher said, you got to be kidding me, young man. She said, you never brought a pencil and paper. That was way before iPads, y'all. But she said, you never brought a pen and pencil or paper to class. She said, you were never prepared. And yeah, your papers were great, but you got to be prepared. That was a life lesson for me because I really wanted that award bad. But back to 6th grade, Miss Bassham, we not only wrote papers, we had to give verbal presentations. And that was the first time I'd ever done that. And because I was very insecure based on my background, we've already covered that, adopted, didn't know my biological father. You know, I was just still trying to find my way in life at that point. And so I was scared to death to stand up in front of people, and I would literally shake. When I held my paper, all you got to do back then, you really didn't have to be a great orator, but you had to hold the paper straight and read it. Well, I couldn't even do that, Eva. I mean, literally, y'all hear this paper shaking? And of course that made it worse because all my classmates laughed at me. They thought it was funny. And so it didn't do anything but make it worse and made
Look at you now, the host of a podcast.
Exactly. I have graduated to hosting podcasts, but literally, let's hear the paper again. That's what it looked like, and that's what it sounded like. I literally shook in my shoes because I was so afraid to stand up in front of people, and it was horrifying. But Miss Bassham took me aside, and she said, there's nobody that can write like you. You're the best at it, and I want to encourage you in that, and you're going to learn how to speak in front of a class. And then here's a cool story, and I'll let you guys tell us about your first mentor. When I did my dad's funeral, you were 8 years old, and Miss Bassham was there.
I remember that.
Okay, and this is one of the most meaningful compliments that I've ever received in my life. Miss Bassham walked up to me, and I'm 50-something years old at this point, and she looks me in the face, and she said, 50 whatever years ago it was, she said, you were the one that was speechless. She said, today, I am the one that is speechless.
Wow.
It was so
That
sweet.
was incredible, and I was blown away. It kind of made me, I just gave her a big hug.
I know.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. But hey,
If you hear
the
a
power
little
of
sniffing,
belief.
It's Dakota. She's up here. She's jumped up and is sniffing the mics and all of that. So apologies if you hear that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's it. I just, the power of believing in someone, it's one of the greatest things you can do. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give another human being is to believe in them.
Yeah.
So thank you, Miss Bassham.
Yes, and going off of believing, she is my current teacher, so woo that. But Miss Ekholm was my physics teacher, and I'm not a good math student. I think I have the ability to be good at math, but I put my effort into history and English, and so math is not my favorite subject. And I was terrified of physics last year is because I had not had algebra or good algebra 1. I had not had good math. And so I was terrified that I was going to do awful in the class because I did not have the math equipped to do it. And I did struggle about the first 3.5 weeks. I had no idea what we were doing. And I said, you know what? I am going to go back and watch the archives that we get recorded for school. And then I'm going to ask questions. And I last year, I spent a lot of time working on, I was terrified of asking questions because I was scared that they would be dumb. And so I would show up to office hours, and I'd be the only student from my class in office hours. And she would sit with me, and she would work on every single question and problem I had. And she probably, over the course of 8 weeks, spent 5 or 6 hours just working one-on-one with me, just teaching me the math, explaining it to me. And she goes, hey, I have good news for you. Chemistry is the same exact math. It just works smaller. And it gave me so much confidence. She believed in me, and it wanted me to do well. And I wanted to prove to her that I was capable because she spent so much of her time early on. Rather than just saying, why weren't you paying attention in class? Or why didn't you ask these in class? She just went, great, here's some problems. Let's work through them together. And it helped me build confidence in my ability. And I did not have the strongest foundation of school. And so it helped rebuild some of that confidence. And so I got her as my chemistry teacher again this year. And I am proud to say I have a 91 in chemistry right now, which is the highest math grade I have ever had. But I want to prove to her that I am capable and that the effort she put in will not be wasted. And so she is one of my biggest inspirations. And it's gone over into my other classes. I want to prove to be the best student I can be because people like Miss Ekholm have given me given me hope, essentially, or put their hope in me.
Yeah. And encouragement.
Yeah. And I mean, and I love that about Miss Ekholm. I mean, we have talked about her a lot in our house. Go ahead.
I have one more thing I forgot to say. So I was writing a speech in rhetoric, which is speech and debate essentially, but required, in first semester. And I was doing it on what the world would look like if, or what the Cold War would have looked like if the atomic bombs had not been used in World War II, but were a legitimate threat in the Cold War. And I needed input from her. I said, hey, what is the science behind this? Like, how much would that have delayed humanity as a whole if... Well, she loved my topic so much. She went home and she was at home. She went to dinner that night and talked about it with her husband, who's in the military, her son, who is like the biggest science person I know, and her 2 young kids. And for a solid week, that's all they talked about at the dinner table. Every night they would bring it up and talk about it. And it gave me so much faith that somebody was so invested in that. And she would give me feedback and she'd be like, oh yeah, my husband wanted me to remind you about this moment in history. And it just meant a ton to me. And so I'm hoping to have her as my advisor on my senior thesis next year because she's continued to show faith in me. And so I would love to continue to have that one more year. That's
awesome.
Yeah. And I love that because, we have seen the opposite when when Eva has not jived basically with the teacher and the teacher had expectations that were, hey, you're just going to need to get this, and not really helping her understand, and the level of frustration that has happened in Eva, and honestly, the lack of confidence that occurred during that. And it just hurts your heart as a parent, to watch your child struggle. And then along comes somebody like Miss Eckham, and your kid thinks that they can, there's nothing that they can't do when a teacher like her believes in them.
Yep,
So
shout out Miss Eckham.
Shout out Miss Eckham.
I'm going to send you this episode when this is over.
Yeah,
so.
love Miss Eckham.
Yes, we love
Matter
Miss
of fact,
Eckham.
you just dated yourself, though.
What did I say?
Did you know
Jived?
that? Yeah, you said shit. Yeah,
said jived.
didn't jive.
Yeah.
So for this generation, it is didn't vibe.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, we have had teachers we did not vibe with. No.
Yes, it was. And they
love
were,
it.
and I'm going to say this now. Most of the teachers I've had that I didn't vibe with, they are great teachers. They just were not
Absolutely.
good teachers for me. They
Right.
did not teach well that I could learn. But
Absolutely.
for some people, they were the favorite teacher they've ever had. And some people can't stand Miss Eckham probably because they don't teach her well. She doesn't teach them well. But hi, Dakota. But for me, Miss Eckham taught to my strong suits, and it helped overflow in all of my other classes.
Yeah, she saw ability. And then she spoke to that ability and helped build your confidence.
Yes, absolutely.
And and that is an art. Not everybody has the ability to do that for people. You would think that all teachers would be that way. But not all teachers are. So that kind of leads into the segue, I guess, of my favorite teacher. She has passed away now, but it was Miss Evelyn Hout. And she was a great teacher. She was so hard. Most people did not like her, and so I was like, oh my gosh, I love her. She is my favorite. But she just would not, I like people who just won't put up with my junk, basically. And so I, could try to get out of this or get out of that or, work the system a little bit. And Miss Hout, she just would not have any of that. She saw that I was capable, but that I wasn't always applying myself. And so she set me up for success in the way that she, taught me. But she also put me in a situation where I wrote a paper. And she loved the paper so much that there was this contest. I don't even remember all the details now, but there was this contest, and you had to go to the radio station, and everybody that had been nominated in this contest had to go and read their report that they had written on the radio. And that was a little bit of a grueling process because I was like, I just don't know that I am cut out for this at all. And but I did. I went and I read my paper, and they would play the recording back to you, and it was a pretty long paper. And if you were happy with it, you kind of went on about your business because they wanted to be sure you had the best take for it to be entered into the contest. Well, anyway, I did not win the contest. But that did not matter to me. Honestly, I felt like I did win because just the level of belief that Miss Hout had in me to even put me in the position to be in the contest. Anyway, she saw more in me than I saw in myself. And it really impacted me with all of my classes because she just kind of put a demand on me just to be better than I was. And it was very tough love. It wasn't like Miss Eckham who has come along and said, no, let's do this together. Let's do this. It was Miss Hout, being very tough love-ish toward me and, just telling me, hey, you're capable of more than what you are doing. And this is good, but if you don't push yourself, you're never going to accomplish anything. It was very tough love, but I loved her for it. So anyway, Miss Hout was my favorite.
That's good. I'm thinking about others that had an impact, but here's a different thought. I think we've talked about teachers and mentors that have just seen a different, ability in you and to pull that out. and to give you encouragement. Well, there's also a different aspect. Some teachers have the ability to teach in a very creative, innovative way to make it exciting, to make learning exciting.
Yeah.
And so specifically, Eva, I think you've had several that have done that for you.
Yeah.
For me, the last and the most recent one I had was when I earned my master's degree at Louisiana State, Go Tigers. There was a history professor named Stan Hilton, and he had a way of just telling a personal story that I didn't even feel like I was in class. I thought, this guy is a master storyteller, and he just told it in such an engaging, creative way that he just had the ability to verbally pull you in. And I could have sat there and listened to him literally all day because he was fascinating, and it made me want to learn more about the different periods of history that he happened to be discussing. So anyway, shout out to Dr. Hilton at LSU.
Yeah, I think the teachers, so too, okay, I'm a big fan of if a teacher takes a class that you like, retake that, not retake the class, but take a class that has that teacher, even if the other classes are available. And so Mr. Altaga is a big teacher. I feel like I have never done a day of work in his class, but I feel like I have learned so much this year from him, because even though we may be spending 6 weeks analyzing the Brutus and Antony funeral orations, it is told, like, he teaches it in a way that makes it feel like class is just us talking. And I feel like he was my junior thesis teacher. And so there was just so much in his class. And he's a very gracious teacher. And so it's like whatever your best work is the best I see too. And so I think that a lot of people get a lot of their faith built up in his class because of how just gracious but kind, but also just like, he is just a very fun teacher. Like he uses analogies that make people laugh. He just teaches in a way, and he uses the same examples. And so by the end of the year, you've learned how to completely analyze a piece of work. You're not working on a new piece of work over and over. It's the same piece of work that you learn different things from. And so you learn how to draw different points from it. And it's just a lot of fun. But another teacher, I am not a fan of structure all the time, but the Mr. Choi's history class has absolutely blown out like every expectation of history. It has made me fall in love with it. The way he teaches it is very like organized. Every thought is written down very neatly. It is like a big, massive, infinite whiteboard he has that he just writes all of our points on. And it is so much fun because he teaches it and then he has us talk about it. And he's like, well, I don't think that's where we were supposed to go with that, but great point. And then he just keeps going, but he's just hilarious. And it makes reading 25 books a year really fun. It's like school books a year in one class, really fun. And so I think that's just, it's a big thing. I enjoy those classes a ton.
Yeah, all for different reasons.
For sure.
Yeah.
But they're very creative in their own different things, but they're extremely enjoyable classes. And I think a lot of my classmates can say the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can go back even further. My 5th grade teacher, Miss Page, she was an older lady. Not a lot of people liked her. I loved her because, again, she was hard on me, but she also believed in me, gave me a lot of extra responsibility as a 5th grader, and she nominated me for hall monitor and, safety patrol and all these things. I'm really dating myself back to my elementary days, but, that these were all opportunities outside of the classroom. And, unless you were a child that could be trusted to go and do the right things when you were out of that teacher's eyesight, you weren't going to get those opportunities. And so I feel like even then, 5th grade, this lady was pouring leadership into me, even though she was a hard teacher. She expected a lot, but still, it was developing me as even a young girl to be a leader and not to just sit back and and just participate, just to
Absolutely.
put myself out there. So, and I always love that.
Yeah, you got a point about that?
No. I just have one that I think we can all agree with. And even though she wasn't y'all's teacher, Miss Robinson. I think
for
we
sure.
all got to experience Miss Robinson. Shout out Miss Robinson. Shout out Miss R. I only got to call her that when we went to Williamsburg. She was my 6th grade teacher, but we all went to Williamsburg. Like all 3 of us. You were the driver. You just drove on your own.
Yeah.
But she was such a creative teacher, and I just think that's another great example. Is she just did a very good job of teaching in a way that made you feel like you weren't being taught, that you were just there having a conversation. And I think that extended in everything. She was just a very compassionate and kind teacher. And I just have a big memory of a homeless lady came up to the school one day, and she was like, you know what? Y'all can do y'all's work on y'all's own. And she went out there and she sat with her and just listened to the lady talk and prayed over her and gave her a Bible and said, hey, here's my phone number. If you ever need anything, let me know. And it just had an example of what a leader is. A leader is not always the one commanding people. Yep. It's the one who sits there and listens and teaches you when you or listens and will teach you.
And you're teaching, she's teaching you by example.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So that was just I was like, oh yeah, we all can agree with that.
Yeah. And by the way, I think I've mentioned this before. We ought to do a podcast on Williamsburg. That was a great 6th grade trip. I
remember so much.
I know, but it's so historical. I personally believe every American ought to get a chance to go to Williamsburg. But anyway, we'll save that for another time. But here's a great point. Before we go get off of this subject of being creative, I get the chance to teach some classes here locally, and we had someone come that really is an expert in current methods of instruction. And you guys know we're way beyond the days of chalkboards and whiteboards, and everything's interactive, and it's just phenomenal what we have in the classroom with apps to go with it. But here's what this guy said that really changed even the way that I currently teach a class. He said, let's not be a sage on the stage. Let's be a guide on the side. And that is so good because sometimes as instructors,
what does sage mean?
A sage is like a wise person that has accumulated all this wisdom.
Don't be so high and mighty on the stage.
Exactly. So don't, and we've tried to bring that into this podcast because I'm a pastor, because I have lived so long. I've got some life lessons I'd like to share, but we never want to be teachy or preachy or act like we've got all the answers figured out on our podcast, because we don't. We can't even come up with the subjects.
No, that's why we do table topics.
And that's why Mom's been here a few times.
Yes.
I was just going to say too, I feel like anybody who, makes history, if you're talking about even just in a teaching environment, anybody who makes the subject matter come to life is a very phenomenal teacher. And, even you, Rex, early in our marriage, because the Civil War is such a time period in history that Rex has devoted a lot of research and education to, we started doing tours of all of the Civil War battlefields. And the Civil War was not of that much interest to me. Yes, I'm a big Abraham Lincoln fan, and there were parts of the Civil War that I, knew about and understood. But it wasn't until Rex and I traveling and going to all of these battlefields, which in and of itself sounds a little bit boring. It really does sound a little boring, but Rex just has this way of making that Civil War history come alive because he is so passionate about it. And anyway, it's just an example to me of, how you can be a lifelong learner. Just get around people who are passionate about a subject and they will help you love it. Because I would have never wanted to know that much about the Civil War, but you always shared it in a way that I had great, I am a visual person, but I could visually see what was happening in these cities and on these riverbanks and on those fields, without even seeing a reenactment taking place, just because of your passion for it and just how you made it come alive. So,
and I think that's what I'm adding to that. The way he's done that in my life is every time we go out to eat, we play this game called History Game.
Yeah.
And it keeps us off our phones at the dinner table, out the restaurants while we're waiting for food. And I'll go, okay, history game. And he'll just go, what was the one you asked today? One of the ones?
What was the first battle of the Civil War, the American Civil War?
See,
not the first shot, the first full-fledged battle.
It was.
And it started with
Bull Run.
Bull Run, very good.
The first battle of Bull Run.
The first battle of Bull Run, which implies
Yeah, there was a second one.
Yes, thank you
but
very much.
We've gone all throughout history. We go to the Civil War a lot, but we've done American. We've just done all of them. But that's a way that's why I love history so much, is because on Wednesday nights when you used to work late, Mama, he would take me to dinner every Wednesday, and he would teach me about history, and that's why I love it so much. It's also probably why I didn't put as much effort into math as I should have.
Well, and speaking of that, I can attribute my love of history to Mrs. Whedon. She was my high school history teacher. Miss Whedon was exceptional. And I've always said this, if you don't like history and you just say, man, it's terrible. Well, that tells me right away you had a history instructor that gave you a bunch of dates and a bunch of events and did nothing to tie the personal interest story together.
Yep.
Because if you tell the story, the people that live that event, and you give that relevance, it's the same thing with the Bible.
For sure.
You can't just tell people about a bunch of verses in the Bible. You got to make those characters in the Bible come to life and integrate those into this personal story of why it's relevant to us today. And anyway, I love it.
Well, and I hope the takeaway, obviously we're sitting here talking about memories, but I hope the takeaway is that everybody who happens to listen to this episode, they think back to teachers and mentors and people in their life that, made them better than what they were at the time and spoke courage into them and confidence into them, because we all have those people in our lives. And so I hope, while we're reminiscing, I hope that it's opened up an opportunity for people to reflect, in their own situations,
Absolutely.
the people that have made a difference in their lives.
And ask yourself, who's teaching you today? Who is still teaching in your life? Because we're supposed to be lifelong learners.
Yes.
And so who's teaching in your life today? Because it doesn't end when you graduate school.
No, it does not.
Precisely. And hey, here's another tip. If those people that we're hopefully helping you think about, if they're still alive, hey, drop them a note, send them an email.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Give them a call and tell them, hey, you probably hadn't thought about me in years, but I wanted you to know. And that kind of makes me think about my football coach, my high school football coach. I played for the meanest one ever. And he's passed away at this point. But I've always
can't see me, but I just rose my hands above my head and slammed them
He
down.
broke a clipboard over Ted Pope's helmet one day during practice, and you would get fired for that kind of thing today. But
I don't know. They probably do it.
Ted Pope Ted was jumping off sides, and Bill Smith was a disciplinarian, and he could not stand basic mistakes. And so everybody was jumping off sides that day of practice, but Ted Pope was the main one. And he looked at him, he said, you jump off sides one more time. And of course he did. Well, he took a clipboard and slammed it over his helmet, and that clipboard shattered in 1,000 pieces. And Coach Bill Smith looks at Pope, and he takes one step, and then he turns back around and he says, and you owe me a clipboard tomorrow. And Ted Pope, when he came to practice the next day, that brother was all dressed out, shoulder pads, helmet, normal uniform, and he was standing there with a clipboard when Coach Smith walked up, and he gave it to him. But the point is, Bill Smith was a disciplinarian. He was tough, and he was mean. But I attribute my Army career to Bill Smith, because we played injured, we played with broken bones, we wrapped them up, and I don't reckon. Yeah, he told us, he said, hey, there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. He said, every one of us are going to hurt at different points throughout the day, but being injured, that is a broken bone or something serious, but don't confuse the two. And so a lot of times in my Army career, there were times that it hurt, and it hurt bad. But I just remember back to Coach Smith, and I was like, this ain't nothing. I played for Bill Smith.
I know, but and it's funny to me. I wonder, as Bill Smith told that story, if he was like, I cannot believe I broke a clipboard over a kid's head. Anyway.
Coach Smith, nah.
He wouldn't have let y'all know it, but I bet you when he told the story, he was like, man, I can't believe I did that.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, he shouldn't have done that, but it's a great story.
But the moral of this entire
episode
is appreciate the people who have invested into you.
Yes.
And appreciate the people you're investing to. But give it your all when investing into people, because you don't know how much you're going to affect them 10, 20, 30 years down the road, 40 years down the road for some of y'all.
What are you saying?
Meaning
Eva?
the two people sitting at the table.
Cough. But also appreciate the people that taught you and are teaching you, because you want to be a lifelong learner. And so don't go a day without learning something. And I mean, appreciate Google if it teaches you something, because it has made knowledge so readily available. But appreciate the people who had to go and actually learn that stuff in depth to teach it to you. So,
And don't discount their what they learned.
no.
Right. And as I've told you before, I think we always thought that wisdom was passed down, and it is, because there's a lot of experience that you just cannot get without, a few years on you. But because technology has basically changed culture, it has changed the world. Learning can go both ways. So there are things that we can learn from each other regardless of your age and where you fall in the generations. And I've always told you that, Eva, that your mother and I have been extremely grateful. We're doing the very best we can to pass you generational wisdom. But because of the age that you live in with all of this high tech, there are things that you can pass to us and teach us. And we want to make
Don't
sure that
discredit teachers because of their age.
That's exactly
I
right.
met somebody at the park the other day, and she went back to get her master's. Well, attempted to get her master's, and she was the oldest person in this college class. And she said, and I valued that teacher because that teacher would let me sit in on any class I wanted as many times as I wanted, because she appreciated that somebody was in there wanting to learn. And so don't discredit people who are younger than you, especially in a in a rapidly paced environment.
Yeah. And by the way, that's biblical. That's what the Apostle Paul told Timothy. Yep. All right. I think that's a great place to cut this one off.
Yes.
And as we always like to say, let's be able to talk from generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, and to leave a review, because it helps people who don't know about us find our message. If you want to follow us on our socials, go to G2G_podcast and Generation to Generation on Facebook. And special thanks to our editors at Reborn Media.